Okay, let's get started. Thank you everybody for joining today. Let me turn on my camera so you can see us. Um, as, um, as I mentioned earlier, my name is Emiliano Conde. Most of you know me already. I started jBilling. I am the president today. And the idea is to introduce you to jBilling 4.1. This is a release we've done a couple of weeks ago. For this, I am joined today by a special guest here in Ottawa. I have Vikas coming from Jaipur, India. How are you, Vikas?
Hi everyone. I'm very good. Thank you, Emiliano.
So, Vikas, you work from India, and but you're visiting today. How long have you been working for JBL?
I've been with jBilling for around 5 years now, and
That's 5 dog years basically. You know, it's really long time.
that's
And
true.
and what role do you have today in JBL?
So from the Jaipur office, what I am handling is the release management team. We have a release management team out there in Jaipur, and we do quarterly releases. And Telco 4.1 is the latest release that we have made a couple of weeks back.
Right, but also along with release management, you also have the role of product manager.
That's right. So, these two roles go in parallel. And so, for product management, what we do is we intercept client requirements, and we go back and we because we want to have those features into the core of jBilling, and we create a roadmap, and this roadmap actually feeds to the release, and it goes to the release implementation team, and then we have a release.
Excellent. And this release has a number of improvements. Some of them we knew we would release it in 4.1. Others maybe we wanted to release them in 4.0 but didn't make the cut. How do you decide what to put in a release?
So every release, we sometimes have many releases going on in parallel.
Right.
So the major release 4.0 was the major release. It was over, I would say, 1.5 years or even more than that under development.
Yes.
And it was by far the largest release we've had. And we wanted 4.1 because there were a couple of minor features which were important. And there were also enhancements to the features that we had released in the 4.0 release, which could not make it on time. And so we planned a subsequent release to have a minor version release. And that's how we have three kinds of releases: major, minor, and the maintenance release. We are going to have a maintenance release for the 4.1 release.
Right.
Pretty much in 2 weeks.
Indeed. Okay. Well, so with that brief introduction, let's jump into the presentation. And for that, I will be sharing my screen. Hope you can see it. So 4.1 today. This is our latest telco release, and let's take a quick look to what we are releasing today. Probably the most important part of this release is the ITG or Invoice Template Generator, which it is a significant improvement. It really changes how jBilling does invoice presentation. And you know, jBilling being a billing system, how to present invoices to customers, it's a very important feature. Then we have a number of enhancements, some related to security, some related to just how assets work, and which of these are rather independent, Vikas, and which are actually modifying the core quite a bit.
So I would say IITJEE is an independent piece. It's a very big piece in itself, but it's independent of everything. It does not affect the core. So it's like a tool that we add to jBilling, and it sits on top somewhere, and it's accessible from the UI. But if you look at the other changes like late guided usage, again, it's a big thing, but it is not independent. It affects many areas in the core of jBilling.
It touches on pricing. It touches on even the history of plan assignment. It's all over the place.
All over the place. Pricing plugin, auto subscription history, customer and account type prices, and asset histories.
Right, so it does. And others are much smaller improvements to existing functionality like password encryption and so on.
That's right.
Okay, so let's jump into the next one, which is the ITG. So ITG, what we have here is a new way of presenting invoices to customers. I think that the invoice presentation is something that sometimes is neglected in billing systems. I do know of fairly large billing systems where changing how an invoice looks like it's a major amount of headache and work. And because the focus is on invoice, let's say generation, the calculation of the invoice correctly with the right pricing and so on, which is kind of like the tricky part to get in a billing system. But invoice presentation is eventually what the customer gets. So far in jBilling, with jBilling 1, jBilling 2, jBilling 3, and even jBilling 4 up to this release 4.1, you have the way of presenting invoices through Jasper Reports designs. So you use the iReports engine or tool that belongs to Jasper Reports, and this is a generic tool for reporting. It doesn't know anything about billing. So what we do then is sort of run a report on Jasper based on one invoice. And that's what is shown to the customer. It's very powerful because it really allows everything under the sun when it comes to showing things to a customer. But any changes to that design, it's rather lengthy because you change something without reports, then you save that design, you need to compile the design, deploy that into a jBilling installation, and then go to an invoice and see how that looks like. And if you just want to change how something is aligned or the color of something, it might take a few of these cycles in order to get it right.
That's right.
So lots of power, lots of flexibility, but not the most productive way of changing invoices. We do keep this into jBilling 4.1 as an option because we recognize that it really does not have any limitations on how much you can change an invoice. But we're introducing a native tool to jBilling. This is the ITG, which is very flexible, has some restrictions, but it knows the domain. It knows is it's a tool to presenting invoices, and therefore we can make it a lot more productive, which is what we are going to talk about and show you today. Key features then, well, first of all, is part of jBilling. That's a big deal, Vikas, right?
Yeah, we're just adding an editor to jBilling. So it's like a WYSIWYG editor. You get instant feedback, and you can download the invoice as well, and you can see how it looks like. It'll look like when it gets sent to the customer automatically.
It's instant feedback. That's a massive difference with what we had before. And this is, as you said, is embedded to jBilling. It's also like studio of invoicing design.
Absolutely.
But although it's very productive, also you have a lot of flexibility as well. You can even write some SQL code behind the scenes and run that and get data directly from the database if you want to get that far.
That is true. Generally, you would not require a developer to make any changes. Like in past, you would require a developer QA and then ship the design to a production. But now, if somebody would want to, then we also allow that an SQL could be written. The output could be saved into a variable, and then the same could be used around the ITG tool anywhere. That's an added flexibility.
Awesome. So the interesting part really is that the ITG knows about the layout of an invoice. You can say, here's the header. Now I want a section with invoice lines. I want these columns to show into the invoice for those lines. And then I want a footer. And then off you go with a simple layout that it took you really minutes to complete. But of course, if you want to go further and you want to then add more sections and get something more complicated, you can as well. You can add another section, and this time it might be to show the events, the usage that support those invoice lines you showed earlier, CDRs and the like, which are a very common requirement for telco. I remember when the iPhone 1 was released by AT&T,
Mm-hmm.
the first invoices that were out were hundreds of pages because the CDRs would report on every usage of data.
Really?
True story. So they had a glitch on the billing, let's say. Um, but here, what you it's obviously obvious just invoice presentation that you have to get right at times. You know, the invoices were well calculated. It was just a matter of what do you display and what not.
And so for that, in jBilling, ITG supports having multiple versions of a template, of an invoice template. So what we could do is we could have different versions of templates. One could be simple, other could be more advanced, and there could be more complex templates, and we can choose and decide which customer gets which format.
Well, great. Let's take a look to this. Let's switch to another tab here where we have a version of jBilling 4.1.
Sure. So for a quick demo, what I have, we're going to look at how easy it is to make changes to an invoice template using the new ITG tool. So we're familiar with the jBilling's configuration menu, and ITG template is a sub-menu under that. It's called Invoice Templates, and this is how it looks. Right now we're looking at two different formats. One of them is called Simple Bill, and another is called Complex Bill.
And I could have as many as I want here, right? I could have one maybe for residential customers, one for business to business, for large customers, or for different brands of different products that I have within the same company.
Exactly right. That's the idea. And then within each of these templates, what we have is automatic versioning built in, right? So let's say you start with a simple format, but as you go on and edit the format, jBilling will automatically create versions. So just in case if something doesn't work out, you could delete the version and go back to the previous version.
That this is something that came from QA actually, because they were testing ITG, and as were they making changes, sometimes that would break the design and said, well, how do I go back? Is there a rollback? And we thought, actually, we can go better than just a rollback. We can just do auto versioning, sort of like Google does with documents as you work with their apps, and it turned out quite well.
True. So what we can do with ITG, let's look at, so we have an invoice already existing here. The invoice ID is 605. And this text field can be used to kind of change this ID to use to see how different invoices will look like. So right now the invoice ID 604 doesn't have much lines. So we'll go back to 605, and all you have to do is click on change, and on the right hand side you see how the invoice looks like. So we have three panes here, three vertical sections. On the left hand side is the structure, is how you structure your invoice. What are the different sections you want to have on your invoice? And if you want to add a new section, this is where you will add, edit, modify the structure of the invoice. The center one, where we have 4 buttons, is where we would work on a particular section. So if you select a section on the left hand side, let's say logo, on the central section piece, you could modify all the attributes in the formatting of the logo. And on the rightmost side is what your invoice would look like. We can also download it, and we can see we can look at the PDF, how the PDF might look like.
Well, because what I see on the right is the actual invoice, but it's very little. And that is, it's great because it's instant. You know, as I apply any change, I rapidly see how that turns out in a miniature version of my invoice. But eventually, after a few changes, I might need to see how the customer would see this, like a LiveScience.
Exactly. So let's imagine a scenario where, back in past, you would have to ask a developer to move the logo on the right hand side, and how easy it is to do now. I just want to move the logo towards the right, and I want to move the other sections towards the left. So I have the logo moved right, but I want to correct the other sections. So
So a simple change in attributes right there. Apply those changes, and you see on the right immediately. Oh, now I have the logo to the right. I have the address to the left, and if that's all you need, well, okay, it took you 15 seconds. Easy requirements, easy changes,
mhm.
and the with other formats or other methods, even the slightest change could take a long time.
That's true. So that was very simple. Let's do something a little more complex. This invoice that we have here is generated from mediated CDR records. So the calls are rated, and this invoice is from those orders. So why don't we add? Let's say the customer would like to see the events, and so the events would be the call details that the customer would like to see, and we already have a section added called event lines, and we set up the fields, we save the fields, and there you go, we have the events
In a second page,
on the
right?
second page.
So I can browse different pages quickly as well, because obviously invoices can be lengthy as well, right?
Yeah,
The and this is something that really goes into the fact that this tool knows about billing. It's not a generic um, reporting tool. It knows about billing, so I can say, look, I just want the CDRs, and it understands. Oh, sure, CDRs. Which columns do you want from those CDRs? And you select them, and that's it. You've got CDRs in your invoice.
that's right. So this is not like a generic tool that we have, where we have a specific billing tool to generate the invoice. I think the other thing I can show is how does it look like when you start. This was a relatively nice format that we have developed over time, uh, but
If we start from scratch,
if you start from scratch, let's say your first format, you give it a name, and it is automatically gets first version. You start editing, and what you have is a very simple format with an old jBilling logo. We start with changing the logo. Let's upload a file.
so we can then upload the file, get that file up, basically goes into the jBilling server and is used immediately. We don't need to do any kind of FTP or anything like that.
That's it. All this is the tool. This is where you will work to create many of your invoice formats, and you can go as far as you want. There is automatic versioning, and you can make it as beautiful as possible. Let's just quickly add a few. Let's just add quickly some lines.
Yeah, the invoice lines are a must.
Yeah. So, like you said, this tool understands billing. So, why don't we add product description here? And we can add assets also. So, we have standard formats available, the standard columns that are there. And I think what we are interested in product description, quantity, price,
Yeah, that's the classic.
invoice details, if you will. And that's as simple. It's as simple as this. There you have it.
Let's pull an invoice.
Let's pull 605 here again, and we have the same two lines.
That's right. That's right. Excellent. Well, great. Thank you, Vikas. And just to show some end results as well, here's an invoice that is generated with jBilling. You can see that there's all sort of not just formatting areas and colors and so on and graphics, but also subtotals, then summary charges, then more detailed charges to see why do I have to pay this, how much in taxes, and later on even the CDRs themselves to explain all the usage that happened during the period. Okay, so let's move on to a few other things that might not be, because I think we would agree, because that ITG is the main or the most important new feature in this version.
That is true. The ITG is itself has been over a year under development. So it was a very big piece, a lot of QA, and that's why we had to move it to 4.1 release.
Right, right. But there's other more less massive changes around customer and account specific prices, and then there's the time capsule enhancements as well. Tell us a little bit about these two.
So we already had customer specific and account specific prices in 4.0 release. What we did here was a minor enhancement. Let's say that we had a contract with a customer, and the customer received some special price for first 2 months.
Yes.
And then later on, the subscription prices would be defaulted or returned back. So when we, in past, like prior to the 4.1 release, if we had to cancel the price after 2 months, we would have to delete the customer specific price. That's how we would work around it. But now we don't have to work around. We can set an end date to a customer specific price, and the same applies to the account specific.
I think that this comes especially handy with what we're going to see right after this, which is the late guided usage.
That's true.
Because so we'll pick it up later. Just let's remember that deleting pricing is not a good idea when you might need later that pricing, even if it is not current anymore. Knowing that that customer had that price at that time in the past is something that could be very important.
That's absolutely right. So this is actually coming from late guided usage actually.
How are the time capsule enhancements?
Time capsule is also a feature that we had since 3.3 version of jBilling. Again, it was enhanced in the 4.0 release, but there was one piece related to plans. We had time capsule for products, but it was missing for plans.
Right.
But this was easy to add in this release because plans are actually eventually products in jBilling. So it was a minor enhancements to this to the time capsule feature.
Great. So we can move on then to late guided usage and rating. I'll explain how this works, and maybe we can take a quick look to
a demo.
Sure. But all in all, what happens with a billing system is that you have periods of time, usually a month, but doesn't have to be, where we produce invoices. And usage comes into the system typically through CDRs. So if I have a March CDR file, well, I will run a mediation process or some similar process in jBilling to get those events, those records, translated into usage charges that should go into the right invoice. And it's not just to go to the right invoice, but also with the right pricing. Considering that the price of that product, which could be a long distance call or an SMS message or something like that, might have changed over time. And as well, this particular customer that I am bringing usage into, well, that customer might have changed also plans, and he might have changed his or her own pricing as well. So
That's
what
right.
happens then that if I get into that file some old CDR that belongs into, say, somewhere in January or just somewhere in the past, something that I have already not just invoiced, but I moved into the future with the pricing as well. This customer in January, we need to know which price did this guy pay for this type of event, considering his plan and his specific pricing. So how is it that we're tackling that now, Vikas?
So we had customer specific price and date specific prices for products plans prior to this release as well. What we kind of added or enhanced was to have the revenue created or arrived correctly if there were records that were arriving late into the system. And I think it applies mostly to the CDRs. When CDRs can get delayed certain time, sometimes it's just 7 days, sometimes it's 2 weeks, and we wanted to rate those CDRs correctly for the period to which they belong. So we fixed the pricing engine of jBilling. We enhanced the customer and account specific prices.
Okay.
We're storing all the pricing history and the subscription history of the customer to achieve this.
Excellent. Is there something we can see on?
Yes, we can see a quick demo of this.
Okay, great. Let's go back.
So it's a very simple demo. What we have is a simple product called calls. And the calls are actually, the price of calls are changing every month in this case. And let me quickly show you the price setup. So the calls are flat priced, but for 1st January, the price is $1 each, $1 per unit, let's say. And then in February, the price is $2, and in March, the price is $3. So it's a linear progression that is easy to follow in this example for the demo. Right. What I have is a customer, Julia Dreyfus, and I've already rated her calls for the month of January, which were priced at 1, and the quantity for this customer remains constant. Since the price doubled in the next month, the order total is 50.
I see.
You can see that this is a current order created by the mediation process. And let's say that I have a file here as an example, in which what I have is certain records for the month of March, but it also includes certain records which belong to Jan and Feb. So the March.
So you're going to run a mediation process now?
That's right. I'm going to run a mediation process.
Why not?
Okay, let's do it. And while the mediation processes this March file, what it has is 3 records each for Jan, Feb, and March. And okay, we want to see them rated at 1, 2, and 3.
Right, I see. I see. So we're bringing usage from 3 different periods of time with for a product that itself has different prices for those 3 different periods of time.
That's right.
Now, because since this is a demo, just to prove that it's a real demo, something has to go wrong. Otherwise, it would look like pre-recorded or something like that.
I hope nothing goes wrong. It's just that the mediation process is still running. We'll see the results as soon as we see some total records populated here. It should be, I think it should be 9 or 10. Yeah, let's give it a minute. And while that runs, can I show the enhancements done to the mediation pagination?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. So while that process runs, we did some enhancements to the mediation screen where we could see since we moved all the mediation to Hadoop HBase now, and all the records are actually stored inside Hadoop and not burdening the relational system DB. So it was an important enhancement that we could not get it very soon, was to have these records paginated on jBilling.
Well, this could be massive amount of data.
Right? This could be huge amount
billions of records, and that's why we got it outside a relational database like Oracle or Postgres or MySQL and into something that could be fully distributed and very scalable horizontally. Yes, that's like HBase.
So one of the enhancements is we have added a drop-down. Since 4.0 release, we have a company hierarchies feature. So yes, if you were a parent company or a root company, one could see the records of their child companies. So we could select a child company and focus only on those records. This helps in scrutinizing or troubleshooting problems with records, right, or even just inspecting the records. The other thing is done is we have first and next pagination. I think that pagination triggers after 25 or more records. Let me show you how we can filter these. So,
not that we have a lot in this example, but
so I'll just type in the dates. So I have a range of 1 day, and I can easily filter the records.
Yeah.
This will help us focus on the records we want to investigate.
And this could be the idea was that because it could be so many, right?
That's correct. So,
well, the mediation process finished because
and we don't have a problem.
So people will think that these are taped or pre-cooked, but I assure you, this is the real thing. It's just things are working. What can you do?
Okay, so back in the past, we could have only one current order per period, but now because the past periods are already invoiced, and the current month run, which is the March run, is has Jan and Feb current orders already expired.
Right.
So we see three orders.
Three orders got each one record.
Yes, and we have, since there were 3 records per the quantity was 6, so the total quantity consumed was 6. So that's why we have the January current order.
That's the January one.
That's the January one because active since belongs to that period.
Yeah.
And it is rated for 6 quantities at the rate.
So the price was 1, which we saw that in the timeline for the product that was a call. Then we got another 6, but this time price at $2 per unit.
And
that's great for February.
Is for February.
Yeah.
And then we have the March one rated at 3.
Perfect. Excellent. Excellent. Thank you very much, Vikas.
Sure.
So we've seen then, we took a look to the latest guided usage, and this brings us to a couple of other things. Well, this we saw, which are enhancements related to security and areas of the system that we at jBilling we have to be PCI compliant, not just because that's what our customers themselves need to be when running jBilling in their own data centers, but also for our telco hosted service, which being PCI compliant allows companies to really either offload to jBilling the PCI compliance 100%, or at the very least help a lot their own PCI compliance, because we deal with the credit card processing, storage, and so on. So what kind of enhancements we are seeing from that angle, Vikas?
In PCI related and security enhancements, there are a couple of areas that are being worked upon. There are password related enhancements that I can talk about. We are securing our API, so improper access control is being restricted. So we're adding more security to our API layer. The other area, the third area where the PCI compliance is having an effect is on the audit logging. We're logging more. We're logging. There are certain mandated logging requirements for PCI. So so we have to have those logs.
Right.
So those are the areas that have improved.
Especially, I guess, around users logging in, changing their password, logging out, and creating a new user, all that type of user management stuff.
That's true. So user account creation now does not require you to. So somebody else creating an account for a customer will not be able to specify a password for the customer. The password is emailed directly to the customer.
And created internally by jBilling.
That's true. So it's basically, we don't even email a default password. It's a link that goes to customer's email.
I see.
And
it's the link that they get.
That's right. So it's more secure and PCI compliant.
Perfect. And those passwords are now encrypted better. They always, I remember from jBilling 1, the passwords were already encrypted in a one-way encryption, so they cannot be decrypted really, just like Unix or Linux type of passwords. But still, we enhance with salt-based password encryption just to wrap up the enhancements on security.
That's right. On the PCI side, Emiliano, there were a couple of more things like password locks out after failed login attempts. We can configure those number of attempts after which the password will lock out, the account will get locked out. The admin can now lock an account if there is some suspicious activity, or if the customer would like to have their account locked for a certain period. The password reset also now allows the customer to reset the password right there on the screen. The password scheme can be changed. So we now support 6 encryption schemes, And these schemes are configurable from jBilling.properties file. And the schemes are not restricted. So you could go and change the scheme. And when jBilling restarts, you could just log in with your old password and jBilling will ask you to change your password to the new scheme.
Wow. So does it convert the passwords from one scheme to the other? How does it do it?
It will not be able to convert because it's only one-way street.
Right.
But you would be asked to provide a new password to set it.
So it will use the old one just to know your current password and then ask you a new one?
That's right.
Okay, great. I'm learning too. Okay, so let's move on to asset changes. We have the asset assignment history. This is, or well, asset reservation first. Actually, it's a minor improvement, I would say, to our asset and inventory management, and allows for processes that involve a customer and involve some asset to avoid having an asset being, when you have a lot of traffic and assets like, for example, a phone number are constantly being assigned to customers. um, it would avoid someone picking a phone number, but by the end of the process, all that phone number was taken by someone else. So that sort of let's say unpleasant situation is avoided by having a reserved status where, say, for example, we have all these phone numbers, and a customer starts selecting a plan, he selects a price. This is happening maybe on a store or on the phone, and they select one phone number, so that goes from available to reserved. And that reserved will last only for so long. If that doesn't change to either assigned or back to available, automatically on its own will go back to available because it's a provisional status.
Temporary reservation.
It's a temporary reservation. You put it better than me. Then, as the sales process continues, that customer then might just say, okay, yeah, it's all done. Here's the invoice, here's the payment, and that reservation then becomes assigned. So there's some transitions that help complete the whole process of sales that involve assets with adequate reservations and expiration of those reservations.
That's true.
And
I think it is going to be a useful feature in jBilling, although it may not be heavily used, but reservations would be.
there are some use cases, some companies that, and where this came from, because
it actually came from a client request where the use case was exactly what it is. It was an addition, and it was nice because it is an enhancements to our asset management module
right.
in jBilling. So
it plays nicely, but I asked that question because really this is not something that we came up with, thinking maybe this will be useful. Most of these features are all coming from customers, right? That they, as we do implementation, they say, well, actually, we do need this. We have this use case of a customer wanting this asset, but having paid for the asset yet, so we cannot provision the asset yet, but we need to reserve it, right? So this is an example.
Most of the time, yeah.
Now, if we move within assets, we have the assignment history. This is a more important feature, I think. This is an important feature even for the late guided usage that we saw earlier. Because what happens is that assets often are used to help with guiding a CDR to a user, meaning mapping an event, which like a call detail record, to a customer in jBilling, who is the person responsible for that CDR, who is supposed to pay for that CDR. Often we know that because of an asset like a phone number, that is, or a modem, for example, or a SIM card, that they are assigned to a customer. And because they are assigned to that customer, then the CDR will come back with that, say, phone number, and we do that mapping, asset to CDR and the CDR to user because the asset is linked to that user. That's why it's important to keep a history. Say, for example, we have this phone number that is available. Okay, so anybody can buy it. Oh, all good. Now we get a new customer here on February 12th. We have Peter. Peter came and just got that phone number. So we got the phone number moved from available to assigned. So Peter starts making calls, and they call him Pete more than Peter, I think. And what happens is that Pete at one point said, you know what, I don't want this phone number anymore. I don't want this phone. I don't know. I'm canceling. On June 16, that phone number goes back to available. And we know now that from February 12th to June 16, that phone number mapped to Pete.
That's right.
Later on, Angie comes along and she says, you know what, I want this phone, and by chance she gets assigned the same phone number that Pete, not relationship between the two, by the way, but they just got the same phone number at one point. It's just different. Is the time dimension that separates them, but other than that, the asset is the same. Okay, so September 5, any new phone calls shouldn't go to Pete. They should go to Angie. And if we get an old CDR coming, say on June 5th, that CDR should be charged to Pete, not to Angie. Angie would be upset. Maybe right. She would be upset with Pete. Who knows? We don't want to get in trouble here. And obviously, if she ever cancels, that phone number, that asset should go back to being available. So you see, we are keeping that history that allows us to know who had that asset, which in turn allows us to guide CDRs to the right customer and to guide CDRs also to the right point in time that then helps with the pricing and a whole lot of things. Is there something we should see on the?
Sure, we can see. I think the slide explains very well, but we can take a look.
Let's take a quick look. Why not?
Okay, sure. So I have a product with some assets already created for, and I also have. So what I have is iPhone 16 into the future. Let's look at some assets for this product. So there is an asset with an ID ending in 4, and which is taken. So the asset status is ordered, and
okay.
it is taken for a customer. So what we can see along with the asset details is that the asset assignment history, where we can see the order ID and the user ID, and we can browse and
go to that user.
Go to that
but
user.
We know that is been assigned since this particular day, since May 13, 2015. That's when the assignment started.
Right. So this part of the section of an asset, this is a growing section.
Right.
The asset assignment history would be recording all the ownership changes to the assets. But let's go and delete the order for this customer. This is a very simple demo I have for this, showing this feature. But a more complex could be creating and looking at the entire history of the asset assignment. So deleting this order will unassign the asset. Let me confirm it's the order, right? It's the order, yes.
Yes, it is.
So now if I can go back to the assets, and the asset has become available.
Now it's available.
And the asset assignment history is updated with the end date.
It has an end date now. And if it was then reassigned, we would see a new row, basically.
We would see a new row linked to a new customer.
Right. Excellent. Thanks, Vikas. We are almost done here. We can take a quick look to the last couple of enhancements we've done, and one we already see, the mediation results with UI pagination. Just to recap on that, we have moved CDR storage because of the sheer volume that we see with some of our customers, plus the telco hosted service that we have now. We've moved that to an age-based database. This is a big data, NoSQL type of storage. We need to be horizontally scalable, pretty much indefinite scalability is now the requirement.
That is true. And it was tricky to get the pagination because this is a different database. It's not a relational database.
Yeah, just for those of you that are developers, even Hibernate offers pagination, kind of out of the box when it comes to relational database. It works very well, but with something that is not relational and that that there might be billions of records, forget about loading any memory or anything. So there's no SQL to do, right? So it's not that easy.
There's one thing I would like to mention, Emiliano, is that this pagination is supported by our API. So we could tell the API
cool,
with an offset and the number of records we want to fetch.
Very cool. So what we saw from the UI, the API handles that as natively as well. Pretty nice. And the last, we had the AIT notifications. There's some enhancement here. What is it about, Vikas?
So AIT stands for Account Information Types, and this is Account Information Types is actually a group of information categories that can be created for an account type, let's say, which eventually is set for the customer. So within a category, we have what we call as meta fields or custom fields, which are used for notifications. Like for example, for a notification, we want to say hello first name, right? So the first name is a custom field, which may or may not be required in all cases, but when it is required, it can be used by notifications.
Right.
And what we have done is we have made some enhancements so that our notifications module could use the custom fields, and within the notification templates, we could continue to use a contact like we used to have in the past.
And that's interesting because as we made the system more flexible, removing a standard set of fields to represent a contact and replacing that with complete flexibility where right now you configure jBilling to describe which fields you want in a contact. So, and you group them in types of, that's what an AIT is, right? It's a group of fields. And that basically means, well, when the notification process or module needs to send an invoice or send any notification, which field is going to be, right? So we had to enhance this AIT so we can give to guide that module into the right field to execute the notification.
That's right. So to probably explain it, if I can in a minute, is we used to have contact types. Now we don't have to have a contact type. What we can have is we can name the AIT category with that contact type which we used to have, like residential contact, or office contact, and then the office contact may have an email, but the residence contact may not have an email. So we have dynamic contacts. The contacts could change on its own.
Great. All right. So that brings us to an end of all the content we had for you today. We're going to answer a question or two if time allows. Do feel free to write all the questions you want in the question section of the GoToWebinar, and we'll answer them. Maybe some now, maybe we'll get back to you, but feel free. So I have the first one, which I think is for you, Vikas, which would be, what can we expect for jBilling 4.2 and when? That's a tough question for you because you might not want to answer that. We like surprises too, but can you give us a hint?
So as far as the timeline is concerned, mid quarter three would be the right time for the 4.2 release.
So not too long, really.
Not too long, and we have dozens of features. So we have a lot of work.
But mention one at least. Come on.
We have a very important and a very useful feature called downloadable plugins, where we don't have to have the plugin sit inside jBilling, but it could be a binary that could be dropped into jBilling and that could be made available.
That sounds pretty cool, at least from a technical point of view. Yeah, and this goes a little bit into the idea of having a hosted enterprise billing system, but still extensible. So imagine a billing system where you can upload a plugin to the billing system so it works differently for you, but not for anybody else, because it's a hosted platform, it's a cloud platform. So that is that's pretty nice. Any other that you would like to mention?
There is contract management. Without going into the details, there are discount related enhancements. There's a bunch of discount related enhancements that we're planning for the 4.2 release. But there are many more which are also as big as these items.
Great. So I have another question here, which is, can you save and import in a different instance a file from the ITG?
Yes, you can. We can
How
see
does it work?
It's simple. Since ITG templates are JSON files, we can see a quick demo. We have a file here. All we have to do is when we start an ITG template, instead of saying new, we can say upload, and we can paste the JSON text file, and it'll create a new template out of it.
So this file that we see here, basically, this is what it is, a JSON file, and is the whole design is this.
This is your invoice design.
Right. Everything is here. So I can just upload this into jBilling, to a company in jBilling. Even the actual graphics are here, right? Look.
Yes.
So I upload that, and everything comes with it.
Yeah.
Cool. Very nice.
It's your live invoice template. You can take it around, and you can use it in another entity if you want.
Great. Well, that's all the time we have today. I want to thank you, Vikas, for helping with this webinar, for demoing these features, and for the release 4.1. And thank you, everybody, for joining.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.